Hi, as Dennis must have told you, I'm Isabel Alice, or Isa for short, and I'm a C7. Um, and I'm just gonna flip. Well, and I work in VFX as a pipeline TD. So yes, more on the technical side, not on the artistic side. And I'm gonna just jump real quick here. So I was actually born in France, but uh, my mom is Mexican, so we moved to Mexico very early on. And I mentioned this because for me, cultural background adds a lot of like variety to how you can think, and like it expands kind of like the way you approach things. Um, and just to kind of like, I'm kind of gonna go through my quote unquote life and how I got to VFX. Of course, touching more on the points that make sense with regards to VFX and not the random stuff. So I grew up in Mexico, and that's where I did before I started my undergrad, I actually wasn't sure what to study. I had an aptitude towards like technology and towards like maths and physics and whatnot, but I really, really liked animated movies. Like I remember when Toy Story, the first one, came out, and I remember like, of course, like noticing the difference between the other movies and that one, and wanted to learn more about that. I also remember at some point, I don't know, bumping into a magazine when I was like in sixth grade or something like that, and the magazine had like an article about CG and or computer graphics, and had a picture of a model like wireframe rendered. So this looks like, if you have not seen this is as if you had made a model out of wires, like a physical sculpture, but in an image, in a computer generated image. And I remember thinking like, I love that. I don't know what that is, but I want to know what that, like, I want to learn about it. But then I was 17. I had to choose an undergrad, and kind of like the artistic side kind of like was long forgotten. And I went more into so I went to a mechatronics engineering undergrad. That Sorry, delusion is starting to happen again. So that got me into more like getting it to use technology, to use gadgets, to learn some programming, but learn also about like the mechanics and the like how things work in this world, kind of thing. And while there, to be honest, I actually kind of got sick of the undergrad halfway through it, but not because of what I was studying, more because I think I get bored easily. And after, I mean, it's a 4.5 year undergrad study. So after like 3 years, I was like, I want something else. Of course, my parents did not allow me to do something else. So I had this opportunity to, while doing my undergrad, to do an internship, which I did in Switzerland, at Cemex. Cemex is a Mexican cement company, and they have a research lab in Switzerland. And this internship was credits for my undergrad, so it was like a win-win, because it allowed me to gain practical experience and to actually understand that what I have learned so far can be used in the practical sense. Maybe not word by word, but like the ways that you learn and the ways that you learn how to solve things can be applied to real life problems. And then I got back to Mexico to, well, of course, finish my undergrad. In the meantime, I was going back in my mind about like, hey, I remember those animation stuff. I remember that I like those. So I actually, while I was still studying the undergrad, I took, for a semester, I took a side course about Maya, like ins and outs, like modeling, rigging, animation, a little bit of effects, and a bit of rendering. Of course, very basic, but I had like a bit of an overview of the whole software. And I also, through the university, I was also able to take a few courses from another career. And the courses that I picked were from the career, from the animation career. And for example, one of the subjects I got that I took was Introduction to Computer Graphics, which was very much programming in C and with OpenGL and other like low-level libraries to create computer graphics. And to be honest, up till that point, all of the programming I had done in my undergrad, I had just hated it. I did not understand it. It just didn't work. Partly maybe because I was programming for hardware and there's so many points of failure and you don't see the feedback, and I don't know. For me, I didn't like it. But then I took this computer graphics course, and I was able to like create cube in broad manners, and then you would see the cube happen in the screen, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's like, I can interact with it. I can talk to, like, in a way, I can see it happen right there, and then I can create something and see it happen right there. I have the feedback instantaneously. So that got me to actually be interested in programming. Before that, the last thing I would have thought is that I would be programming now as my like day-to-day. Then because because I was in that moment where I'm like, okay, I've taken these Maya or animation related courses, but I have this technological background, and I wasn't like, I wanted to find something where I could like have like this convergence of both things. And I wasn't sure, like I was looking for master's degrees in animation, so for like Wrigley College and whatnot, but they're very much about animation, like as an artist. And I wasn't like, then if I were to look for like a more like a technical one, it was very much like engineering, like hardcore. And I just did not find something in between until I bumped into the CDM program.
That's very Goldilocks. This one's too soft, this one's too hard, this one's just right. That's nice, I like that.
Yeah, what I liked about it was, so just the project approach, the fact that it's you're not doing a thesis and you're not just doing coursework, you're putting what you've learned so far into practice. And you're putting into practice with people of different backgrounds, because that's another thing. When you study your undergrad, you're studying it with people that are studying the same thing as you. Maybe there's some crossover with a few other careers, but those careers are typically very similar to yours. If like, I had courses with mechanical engineers, but it's still the same mindset, right? Whereas in real life, most of the time, you're going to be working with people that have very, very different mindsets. And you're going to have to interact with those people, and you're going to have to learn how to interact with those people. And that's like one of the things that really caught my eye from the CDM was that idea that it's putting everyone together and making them work together, and making them work for a practical approach, not for like some like course that is like hypothetical thing, or some very much like thesis, like super researchy thing. I like the like practical approach, which actually is kind of what like that practical approach thing that I'm talking about really cemented, at least on me. I know there's different people, but like from the CDM, so you have to do an internship to actually get full credits so you can actually get the master's. And through these talks actually that happened here at the CDM, well, Dennis and company invited Ken Perlin to the school.
I was going to say, like, for everyone else who's on the call, I mean, if they know anything about the visual effect, the Perlin noise effect is named after the guy. Ken is a fan of the program, spent time with us, and likes to give back. And yeah, it was just a great opportunity that the two great minds, like minds, connected. So is and Ken, and I like that you dropped the pin in the New York thing, because it's telling your story. I gave you your water break. Back to you.
Yeah. Yeah, so this, well, as you say, Ken Perlin is actually one of the pioneers on CG, like computer generated graphics. His code, I mean, or at least his noise functions, several ones, are well known. And through the
They
CDM,
won a technical academy award too, right? The
yes,
Urban Noise
for
Academy.
the first one.
Setting that up for your award after, but anyway, I just thought that's just like that's
Yeah. Which I think that function was used on Tron, the original movie. So it's a little bit old. Anyways, so yeah, through the CDM, I got to meet a few people. One of them was Ken Perlin, and by talking to him, he ended up inviting me to do my internship with him at NYU in New York City. So I did, and from it, like the project that I was working on there was it was back when the Oculus Rift was still a like HDK. It was not commercially available yet. And there was a lot of talks about VR and whatnot, but without much haptic feedback. So the main thing with Ken and with myself, we were talking about how do you get that haptic, so like that physical feedback while you're on a virtual world, right? Because you're just moving around, there's nothing to touch that, or like whatever you see, you don't feel it, and how do you get that kind of feedback back? So I worked on a project about that. And to be honest, my main takeaway for me at that time, maybe in a few years from now, it'd be different. But for me, my main takeaway about that internship is that I learned about myself, that at that moment, I was not looking for a scientific research kind of position. What I was looking for was more of like the immediate practical, like I have a problem and I need a solution for it for like now, not for 10 years from now kind of thing. I was looking for more for like I have a real problem right here, I need a solution, versus I have a hypothetical problem and I need a solution. So I learned that about myself. Maybe a few years from now I'll think differently about that, but right now that's what to be honest, that was my main takeaway was I don't want to be doing that. Which in a way it's kind of that thing of like you need to try stuff out in order to figure out. I mean, you can know what you want to do, and if you know what you want to do, that's awesome and go for it. If you do not know what you want to do, then test things out, like look for opportunities, work them out, work them through, and learn from them. And for me, that was my main takeaway right there. I wanted to mention also that through the guests that the CDM has had, like for example, like you want to nurture that relationship, so because you don't know if you're going to see them later, maybe for an internship, or maybe a few years from now for, I don't know, they'll recommend you for something, or you'll bump into them. For example, Isabelle Arver, who's a like machinima curator and like video game curator, French. She was at the CDM for like a month, I think. I don't know, it was quite a while.
It was a little longer. She's been often. She's visited with us a few times and helped us put together the evolution of gaming exhibit.
Evolution of gaming, yeah.
Yeah.
So, as an example, I was actually just on holidays. I mean, last year, definitely not this year, in Japan, and because she was just doing some world tour kind of thing, and I noticed that she was in Japan at the time that I was going to be in Japan, and I messaged her, and I got to see her for going out for dinner or something. And it's one of those things that you need to kind of be proactive and remember, and like and it's one of, like, at least for me with Isabel, partly because we're both French. I mean, I'm part French, but we really got along. So it's you need to like kind of work that relationship, and you don't know what's going to happen next. Like, yeah. So when I finished that internship with Kemperlin, I got back to Vancouver, and by then I had officially finished the master's program, but I was unemployed, right? Because a lot of the people from my cohort stayed in Vancouver for their internships, and then were able to get hired after the internship. that was not necessarily my case. So to connect with other people, to try to like broaden my view of like what's out there, SIGGRAPH in 2014 was in Vancouver, so I applied to be a student volunteer, and I got accepted, and that opened my mind into like the SIGGRAPH world. By the way, SIGGRAPH, as far as I know, stands for Special Interest Group in Graphics.
Larry will correct you on that one if you're wrong, but Larry's heavily involved in SIGGRAPH, as most people. There we go. He's giving you the thumbs up. That's awesome.
Awesome. So, for example, that's a conference that I had heard of back in my undergrad by my professor that taught me the intro to computer graphics, and that when I learned about it, because then I had no idea about it. Computer graphics was not like a career or a course, so I had no idea that there were humongous conferences about all of these things. And I also did not know, like, in a way, for me, animation was very much, or like VFX and animation was very much an artist's world. But then by being at SIGGRAPH, I very much got opened to like, oh no, this, I mean, yes, it's an artist's world, yes, but it's also very much a technical one. Like, without the technology, you wouldn't be able to do the art on top of it, kind of thing. So it really like opened my mind to these industries, because also back then my thought was like, well, if you want technology and you want art, you have video games. It's like, well, I mean, yes, but that's the easy answer. Technically, you have everything, right? For example, a talk at SIGGRAPH, I don't remember what year, by IKEA, the Swedish furniture maker. They, like, actually all of the images in their website are rendered. None of them are photos. All of them are computer graphic, like, made images, which means that they need all this like infrastructure and like artists and whatnot to work on them, right? So it's actually quite interesting that if you open yourself to like looking out there and seeing what there is, you'll see that there's like technology and art are everywhere. You just kind of need to open yourself to like, it's not just video games, there's more to it.
That's a great example with IKEA, because they also had the app with the AR enabled furniture, drop it in your home. Like, again, I think that was the common thing with our program too, being a master of digital media. Everyone had that idea of animations and games. It's an entertainment industry, but it's really every industry needs that digital media mindset and those technical solutions. And I'm glad you pointed to that, because it's true. People have a lens, or they think that world is for artists, but that world wouldn't exist without all of those components, from the production management to the technical, to the TD or technical artists that are bridging. That's what you're wearing, a few hats there. I mean, you already had a really cool title, being a mechatronics engineer, which I still think is awesome. But I mean, that you were able to pursue a path, and also bringing up games, which is interesting, because I hope you're going to touch on Pix and what you did with
I was meant to touch on it like 10 minutes ago, but I'll get there. Yeah, I'm seeing my notes and like, oh, I kind of skipped half of it. Anyways, so I went to SIGGRAPH finally, after having heard about it back in like 2008. Finally made it to SIGGRAPH. As a student volunteer, so I didn't pay for it. Yay! And it just blew my mind. And well, first of all, how big in the end the industry is. I mean, at the same time, it's kind of small, but it's huge. There's so many things happening every year. There's a lot of things happening, and it also got me to talk to people and to interview with people, and it landed me a job, which was not in Vancouver, it was in Toronto. So
I'm sure Jeanette told you that Toronto was an okay place to be. I think for a lot of people on this call, it's like they get Vancouver now, but Toronto, I'm from Toronto too, no bias. So, but Toronto's not a bad place.
Yeah, I really liked it, to be honest. A little bit too cold for my liking, but But yeah, so, and in a way, like the move to Toronto, there was a moment where I was kind of not dreading it, but I was doubting it, because because it's like, well, I'm in Vancouver, like I've moved here, but then I realized, like, you know what, I've already moved countries to try to proceed with my career. So moving cities, like, who cares? Like, if this is not going to happen, then like if I don't make it happen, it's never going to happen. So here I am. So, and I got hired as a pipeline TD at Mr. X. Mr. X is a visual effects studio in Toronto, who's maybe known by Vikings and for like Shape of Water and other Guillermo del Toro smaller movies kind of thing. And I mean, a lot of the pipeline work that gets done in VFX is written in Python, the programming language. And before then, I had never written anything in Python. So when I got hired, I was like, oh, well, I need to at least learn the syntax. I mean, programming in the end is very much like maths and logic, and it's just logic, but you need to know how to write it. So I actually used like Code Academy or like you name it, one of those sites to try to learn the syntax. And then I was like, oh, okay, I think I get it. And that was my basic knowledge about Python when I started. But I mean, at the same time, I knew technically how to use Maya. I mean, I would not be the modeler on the show or like a rigger or whatnot, but I knew how to use Maya. I know how the interface looks. I know how to make things happen. I had not necessarily coded for Maya, but I mean, you can put two and two together and eventually get there. So I'm really thankful for the person that hired me to have put faith in the fact that I had done all of these things and that I could therefore learn how to be a pipeline TD. Because yes, before that, I had never done what a pipeline TD does, which...
That's actually, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because especially for any C14s that are on the call on that too, like it's, you know, again, often people feel they have to have 100% of everything that an employer is looking for when they list something off. But a common thing that we're hearing is that if you have the aptitude, or you can show you have a history of picking things up quickly, or that you're a good fit on the team, they're willing to take a chance on you. Because it is, yeah, that's a perfect example that you know, Python being something you were less familiar with, but you had transferable skills. They took a chance and obviously paid off, but I won't take a spoiler out of what you're saying about how you did there. So back to you. Water break.
Thanks. Yeah, so like I mean, I keep saying pipeline TD, but some of you might not know what that is. In VFX, because I know that the term might change in video games and it might change elsewhere. But in VFX, it's like a pipeline TD is that person that is both helping the day-to-day like artist's life. If they have a bug of like they bump into like something is breaking and they're kind of like the firemen trying to like figure out what's the problem and try to fix it, either through code or through finding that the cache that they were doing has an issue and therefore you need to cache it in some other way or whatever it is. But we're also the ones that create tools on top of Maya, on top of Houdini or other software to help make the artists' lives a little bit less painful. Because like they might have some tasks that are very repetitive, or some things that might be complex if you do it manually, but if you do it through code, it kind of ties together. So we write that code on top of the software. Of course, there's other people in the company that manage the database and that do more like back-end things. In the end, the pipeline to me is a little bit more front-end, not so much, like not necessarily the front-end as like the GUI per se, but more like front-end as like what is facing the artist. So like in the end, your end user is the artist in your studio. So it's kind of like you have this like like you communicate with the artists, and that communicate with the artist very important point. That takes me back to what I was saying, that a big thing from the CDM was how you work with all of these people of different backgrounds, and you need to learn how to talk to be understood at at a equal level. And I'm not saying you should dumb things down or you should make them smarter. No, I'm saying you have to understand that people's backgrounds are different, and that if you as a programmer need a file to be of a very specific format or whatnot, maybe you ask that of your artist, but maybe you explain not necessarily the technical, but more like the whys, so that like, or what makes format A be better than B, so that they can understand, like, so that they know for next time that which one they need to pick or whatnot. So it's kind of like explaining, but in the terms that would be understood by the person that is on the receiving end. And that's, like, for me, that was also a big thing from the CDM course, which it's just, I mean, it's obvious, but at the same time, it's not necessarily something that happens every time. An example of a tool that I have worked on and how it made things easier for the artist team. So, for example, actually, I'm going to show you the demo reel of a episode for Vikings. I think it's muted. Yeah. So you see the ships and the houses and whatnot. Those, I mean, yes, the ones are just a few are maybe hand placed, but they're instanced, or they're like copies of the same thing. And you're not necessarily copying every single one. You're like, so you make a tool so that they can like paint on top of the terrain, and that painting is just instances the houses randomly. So like there might be 5 different types of houses, and it just instances them randomly. So that would be a tool, for example. Yeah. And I'm gonna cut this right here because I need to talk about something before we continue. Where's the plus? Oops. Sorry, technical things.
If you don't have a technical glitch, there's something wrong. This is how things go. Even as a pipeline TD. So.
Yeah. And sorry, kind of about what you asked. I just remembered something. Something that I used to explain what I do to people that are not from this industry. So, for example, to my sister, who's a financial analyst, who of course has I mean, she has seen me through the years and knows what I do, but like, if she hadn't, the way I explain what are the tools that we do is, imagine Excel. She's the user of an Excel spreadsheet, but maybe she doesn't know how to use macros within Excel, but I know how to use macros. So I write macros to make her life easier when she uses Excel. That's more or less what I do. Now, that means that I need to know a little bit about Excel in order to be able to write those macros, but it doesn't mean I need to be an expert on Excel, which kind of gets me back to like having some knowledge about Maya, right? And then, I mean, I've learned stuff since, but like having that knowledge about the tools that are being used by the artists, and being able, and then goes back to the talking to the artists, which the keyword would be like kind of empathize with your user and be able to extrapolate what it is that they're trying to do and why, and how you can make it into a tool that will help them. So when I was at Mr. X, I just had this kindling of like wanting to learn things and wanting to be able to do shots, like actual production shots. And I decided to learn how to use, I mean, the software that Mr. X used at the time to do massive crowd simulations was massive. Massive is famous because it was kind of created for Lord of the Rings 20 years ago. Like, whoa, time flies. So anyways, I decided that I wanted to learn how to use that software. So I asked permission in the studio, and I actually stayed late during the weekdays and even came in a few weekends to learn on my own how to use the software. And then came the day that I was asked to help on a few shows, because like the main massive artists were swamped with work on like a very big show, and a couple of small projects needed help, and I was asked if I could help. So I did. So that's where actually my first movie credit was actually as an artist, as a crowd artist, and it was the remake of Secret in Their Eyes. And then because I did a few things like that, which apparently worked out fine, I was also asked to help for Vikings on season 4. And that got me an Emmy nomination. And also a Canadian Screen Award. And that's where the memorabilia that we were talking about earlier comes in. So this is my Canadian Screen Award. It's not an Emmy, but it's the Canadian equivalent, which is
heavy, cool. Right? It's heavy. So
yes.
Yes.
So that was awesome, to be honest, to be able to, because I was still technically a pipeline TD at the same time. Of course, not full time. I was kind of like half and half. And as production needed more help, maybe like more like ongoing like shots to be delivered, then of course there were weeks I wasn't doing pipeline. But it was pretty cool to be able to sit in the artist seats, to be able, to do shots and to be able to participate to the final pixel on the image. But at the same time, one thing that I really, really learned from that experience was that some of the tools, like sometimes you get these feedback from the tools that you make, like, hey, it's a little bit slow. Hey, this is not really working. And you as a developer, maybe you're like, oh yeah, but there's this little workaround, or like, oh, sorry, there's bigger issues. But then when you're the one sitting in that seat and you're using that tool as your day-to-day thing, that like, oh, it's a little bit too slow. That might be 10 seconds slow. Well, but if you use it every 5 minutes, then those 10 seconds add up very quickly and it becomes very cumbersome. But you do not, as a developer, you might not necessarily realize that, because when you test it out to make sure things work, you're not testing it out 24/7 for a week. You're testing it out a couple of times here and there. So like to be able to sit in that and like actually see what's going on was for me a huge learning experience, and I think also helped me a lot to be a better pipeline TD. So it's one of those things. And then I decided to move back to Vancouver into another VFX studio, which is DNEG, which is where I'm currently at. DNEG is a much bigger VFX studio than Mr. X, and it's one of the big ones. And it's known for actually like Avengers and all of those kind of movies, but it won the Oscar for Best VFX for Blade Runner 2049, as well as the year after for First Man. So yeah, I started at DNEG when First Man was just being delivered, so I didn't actually work on it, but yeah. And that's kind of my journey. I definitely have links and things that I can show.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you
kind of like open the floor to see if there's questions or comments, or like wanted more approach, like, I don't know, more focus somewhere more than in another place. So.
Yeah, well, why don't you pull up your tabs, and I'll just kind of do some recap here for everyone else. Do feel free to ask questions. You can do it in the chat, or you can go on camera. We're at that point of the show where you can ask questions and be seen and network that way too. But she touched on so many important things, that empathy and the understanding of the the needs of the different departments that you're working with, but also that work ethic. I mean, the creating of the opportunity, working still as a TD, but taking on a new learning, leading to some hardware, getting that award. I mean, that is earned through hard work and having that aptitude, interest, and finding your way. I mean, I also love the story of interning with Ken Perlin at NYU and realizing that that's not the path you want to go on, and also your willingness to explore opportunities. You moved to this country, why not Toronto? Well, that is like so far away. I know, because I'm from there. I mean, it's like Canada's a very big place, but I mean, being open to those opportunities, it kind of sets you up for, all these things. And I think of your classmates, and we were just talking about the C7s in general, because there's always the best cohort ever conversation that goes on.
Of course.
And everyone on this call, I mean, you're going to meet a few other C7s. I can't help it. They're a really good group. But yeah, I was remembering the PICS project. I was going to say if you could pull up that tab or something, because it was really cool. Again, one of the opportunities that you had was to pitch your own thing. You talked about liking to work on, real world problems, or, and you had some projects. I think you were on the Go team or something.
Yeah, so Go team was with the client was from UBC, from like a very specific, like UBC, but like civil engineering, architecture, and like urban planning kind of related.
Yeah.
So we did, in a way they were looking for a way to like pitch their like sustainable urban, like large scale urban plans to the community, but in a way that can be transmitted to the community that is neither too technical nor too dumb, quote unquote. Which wall? Oh yeah, that wall. Yes. So that was a huge learning experience, actually, because we were dealing with very much scientists and researchers that have very specific mindsets, and they were looking for very big things, which was like, hey, we have a semester. There's like scope. Like let's figure out where we can actually help you, and not just like turn around, like, or go around in circles, right? So we ended up doing an app built in Unity that maybe the video has something, but that with awesome sound. Oh, come on. Anyway, that would in a way was like a fancy 3D PowerPoint, if you want to like summarize it. Here is like an image. We were inspired by SimCity 5 that came out a little bit like around that time, and we're actually like waiting for the game to come out so that we could actually open it up and see the interface. And then their servers went down the first week, and it was like, no, we need the game. But yeah, in a way, we kind of like did this 3D PowerPoint, like interactive, where you see like, oh, if you do a very specific kind of urban planning scenario, then what happens to your neighborhood? Oh, but does the gas emissions go up? Does the whatnot? So we added little animations, little effects, like, and yes, it's very much like a.
That really speaks to your IKEA point too, about all the industries that need these digital skill sets, right? Again, urban planning and sustainable, creating an emotional connection or visual interface. All of this is, super impressive. I mean, it's memory lane here too, because I'm seeing these projects again, but that's super cool. Like, so you went through that path of having the client project experience, yes. But then didn't you found some friends in your cohort and you had your own idea you wanted to explore? How did that happen?
Sorry, kind of reading. Is VFX just in the film industry, or someone can be VFX artist in animation and game industries? In the end, when I say VFX, I mean VFX and animation. Game, I would say it's slightly different, but there's the cinematics, which is very much the same. So, because like for like game trailers and some cinematics are rendered as if it was like a VFX pipeline. It's not necessarily in game. Granted, today with Unreal and Unity's like real-time kind of rendering whatnot, that might change, but it's, yeah, when, at least right now, like all of this 40 minutes, when I've said VFX, I'm meaning in general, like visual effects, whether it's animation or film or TV or commercials or anything computer generated, really.
Yeah, it's a good point about the changing of technologies and real-time visualization in game engines, because it could change things. There are companies like Goldtooth Creative in Vancouver that were known for creating game trailers, so that there were visual effects artists within there. But I think things evolve, much like virtual production that we were talking about too. But yeah, I guess the point where I was looking at with the unclickable studios or picks is that, in the MDM, one of the options in your final term or third is to do a pitch project. And I remember you came together with some of your classmates because you were wanting to explore new tech and how that might. But anyway, over to you.
Yeah. So like the Leap Motion controller had again, not commercially available then, had just come out as like for people to developers to test and to try to like start using, so that when it would fully come out, there would already be content for it. And we pitched a project that utilized it, and the idea being that we would create a game, but that would explore the capabilities of the Leap and try to cater the game mechanics to the Leap and not to like your typical like tablet or controller or whatnot. So that we would try to really use that 3D space that the Leap gave you. So we worked on that. The blog is now on a free WordPress, so it might not be as pretty as it used to be. But what we try to do is keep a daily blog, so we would rotate between ourselves. So because we had artists, designers, we had a bit of a business kind of like thought as well, and we had the technology side. We actually, so each person that wrote would write about what, like kind of like with regards of their role. So we have different things about like the art, design, the actual like interface of the game. So some mock-ups, and then putting those mock-ups into actually like prototypes, and with videos and whatnot. But before we got into the computer, we were in the whiteboard or like with paper. We even mocked up one of the ideas of the game with like Lego, because one of our fellow peers is a Lego.
Rafa, right? Was it Rafa that was the Lego maniac?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, but that actually, I mentioned the Lego, but the important part of using the Lego was it allowed us to use 3D right there and then, and to be able to visualize it even better, which was very helpful. And we actually also tried, I think we did manage, but to do videos every week, sort of like a recap kind of thing, of course, like different ones. So I probably would not do the videos if I had not again, but I think the blog was an amazing thing, because it really also it helps you remember what you've done. It helps you in hindsight kind of get back to it.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point, because I'm thinking about the overall portfolio experience, the things that you've done that got you the opportunities where you're at. And this is a perfect example of that, where the documentation, it's often an afterthought for a lot of people, but it's an important part for those that are looking to build a portfolio and show others what they can do, or you reflect back on how many projects have you done, and this still exists. Like, that's awesome to see this again.
Yeah.
I just think it being really cool. And I guess the point here too is that you did a pitch project, and it was an opportunity to potentially form a company or launch a game or a studio, but you learned again through that process, maybe that's not something you all wanted to do, but you and your classmates are all being very successful in your own right?
Yeah, actually we got contacted by the Leap Motion guys when we were doing this, because they wanted us to make it, because we did a single level kind of thing, and they were like, oh, that's awesome, can you make the full game by this date? And it's like, well, we need to eat. It's sounds great, but So that didn't pan out, of course. But it was great to see that if you put some effort, of course, in like early tech, where of course they're gonna want content. So you also need to know where to put that effort in. But you can actually get your name out there. I mean, you need to work for it, but it's possible. And through
That's a good point. Yeah, with being on top of the early trends, or like we were talking about that about UI and UX in the early days. If if you had any strengths in that area, you were very employable. Or like tackling some of these new techs. If you're an early adopter, one of the first apps on the iPhone that did really well for sales, or getting early content on platforms can be very successful. So, but yeah, I think but it also speaks to your desire to explore those opportunities and see what's there, and that's what I saw in your team when you were doing this.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a question. Do you spend time learning new software and tools, or prefer to perfect your knowledge or traditional tools, Maya, etc.? I'll be honest. A lot of times I'm lazy and I just watch TV or play video games. But I've taken a liking on Houdini, or the more like procedural kind of tools. So because I don't like, in a way, I can draw through programming, kind of thing. But to be honest, like, I mean, that's kind of the liking I've taken. I haven't really done like, oh, I'm gonna spend whatever many hours doing this. I've also, right now, with all this like working from home and whatnot, I've also tried to stay away from the computer. So I've been actually doing more. I've picked up more manual hobbies. So I've been doing like miniature maquettes as well as photography. So that's something that I've I mean, completely kind of related to this, but I've been getting into. Let me just open Lightroom real quick. Into doing like photography of water drops, so like macro photography, but of very specific things, which is kind of very weird and random. And apologies for my.
It's nothing to apologize for. You got to peek behind the actual human curtain. We're humanizing everyone here.
Where did I put? Well, here's like a little thing of the miniature. I don't know, just hang on with my hand, like going back to using my hands, because like I did study mechanics engineering and I liked it, and I miss doing things with my hands, so trying to do like things with my hands. I also have a 3D printer and like laser cutter, so like I cut this with the laser cutter for like Mexican Day of the Dead and things like that.
That is awesome.
And the photo thing that I'm talking about is, if I look at this one will be the least bad. And my machine is now starting to struggle. There. Things like this is what I've started to get into, which is, I know, very random, very specific, but I don't know, I find pretty cool, and it allows me to learn things also about lighting, like, and what could work for CG. I'm just trying to do it in real life. Thanks, Kristen.
Oh, that is so cool. All right, so I think what we're going to do here too is, if anyone does want to go on camera and say, wave, say whatever. I mean, we're at that 10-minute mark where I kind of have to end things, sadly, but this has been amazing. Thanks, Parasu. Yeah, we really appreciate your time, Isa, and it's like, I think all these accolades and success, you've earned it. And yeah, there we go. We got some actual virtual claps to go with my actual claps here, but can't say how, this is so appreciated, especially now. And it's, hard to get everyone together in whatever way we can. And these talks are an important part of that. But I can't wait to, when we can get everyone together again and celebrate in a proper way. You've earned that extra ice cream scoop or extra beer or whatever Larry's going to bring you one too. I see him.
Well, beer.
Exactly. Whatever you want. It's on the house. Yeah. But again, everyone, so this isn't one of your alumni peers. This, you're going to hear from a lot of different speakers over the fall and into the spring as well, and you get a lot of different perspectives. Obviously, your alumni network is one that's really close to home, and they give back in this way. And overall, I mean, it's kind of a family here. I mean, you're gonna hear a lot of us reference, students and projects, or there's a certain closeness or awareness that has, it's a part of the MDM experience. It's hard to really put it into words, but I mean, and her whole cohort there was awesome. I'm sure your cohort is awesome too. I'm reserving judgment for now, but yeah, again, thank you so much.
Just like quick little things, speaking of like cohorts and just, I mean, getting together. For example, Bonnie from our cohort got married in India in 2015, and like 10 of us went there. While some of us, like I was in Toronto, quite a few were in Vancouver. Alan was in Colombia, and we met and we went to India and went to Bonnie's wedding. So, of course, like not everyone can afford necessarily to go there or can take time off of work or whatnot. But it was an amazing experience to be able to go to one of our peers' like country and meet their family. So
yeah, it's a great example of that. Thank you again, Isabel. Thank you everyone else for joining the call. I know some of you have classes, and a lot of us are living in Zoom now, so if you need a little break before you join that class, take a quick one. Isabel, thank you so much. Josh, if you're still there, we can probably end things, but thank you, owe you one. And thank you everyone else for taking time to, continue the learning and networking journey. So, all right.
cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Isa. All right.